find out what most influences the electric guitar sound. To a greater or lesser extent, practically all the elements that make up an electric guitar influence the final instrument sound. Strings, nut, electromagnetic pickups, amplifier, or even the connecting cable can make or break a good guitar sound. Each component contributes its nuance to the final sound of a guitar, or even in the case of essential elements of our equipment such as the electromagnetic pickups or the amplifier, it would not be a simple nuance. These elements, depending on their quality or characteristics, can radically modify the sound of a guitar. These components of our equipment would be two of the fundamental pillars in the creation of a good electric guitar sound. In the case of the pickups, they would be in charge of creating the signal, and in the case of the amplifier, it would simply be in charge of processing that signal and projecting it appropriately. It is quite commented the influence on the sound as far as the headstock size. Many experts claim that a larger headstock will add more body to the sound of the guitar, but it would not be very noticeable. I dare anyone to tell me the difference between the same Stratocaster with a big headstock or with a normal headstock. Another thing would be to adapt the size of the headstock to compensate for the weight of the guitar, simply for aesthetics or in the case of the Stratocaster, as a mere advertising support. The large headstock of this guitar model was an idea of the CBS Corporation, simply so that the Fender logo could be seen more clearly on television. The Stratocaster model has some myths that have been generated over time, such as removing the back cover that covers the springs of the tremolo system to achieve a better sound. It is obvious that a Stratocaster will sound the same with or without a cover, but many people decide to remove the top for good because of the impossibility of placing the strings on the guitar. On modern Strat models, the top opening is placed in a position where the bridge is raised at the back. So if we want to jam the bridge against the wood, the cover will not allow us to insert the strings, and we would be forced to remove the cover every time we place new strings, or simply remove the cover definitively. If we remove all the strings from the guitar with the bridge raised at the back, the springs will pull the bridge, and the same thing will happen. So it is always better to change the strings one by one in this guitar model, so that the bridge keeps its position. If we have problems of this type, we can also cut the necessary piece cover with a fret saw to insert the strings. Then we give it the final shape with some files, and we sand a little the burrs to finish the job. This way we will never have to remove the cover to place the strings. The tuning pegs would also be of little importance in terms of sound. However, they are an essential part of something as important as the tuning of the instrument, and this element can be among the first improvements we can make to our guitar if the deficiencies are notorious. On the other hand, the nut does affect the sound of the guitar, although it also affects the tuning. This is an important part in the resonance, or even overall tone of the instrument, as this component directly transmits the vibrations of the strings through the neck. If our guitar has a low-quality plastic nut, you will notice an improvement in the tone and tuning by switching to a bone nut. The change in tone would be really palpable when installing a bronze or brass nut. These materials provide an additional brilliance that is impossible to obtain with other nut types. Let's move on to the neck woods. In terms of sound, this is perhaps the place where the change is most noticeable when it comes to the different woods. Maple and mahogany are the most commonly used woods for neck construction. Maple gives a brighter tone compared to the warmer tone of mahogany. This tendency would be more noticeable depending on the fretboard's construction wood. For example, rosewood would be a wood that provides a warmer tone, and maple and ebony a more defined and brighter tone. The wood used to build the body of the guitar can also contribute its slight nuance. For example, alder or ash wood have a more defined tone compared to the warmer tone of mahogany wood. Basswood would be found in an all-terrain area, widely used in models with mixed configuration of single and dual pickups. Some high-end guitar brands boast of the qualities of their wonderful varnishes and ensure a high percentage in the final sound of their wonderful products. But honestly, a coat of varnish, no matter how great it is, should have little influence on an amplified and generally distorted instrument. Let's move on to the electromagnetic pickups. As I already mentioned, this is one of the parts that can influence the sound of a guitar the most. You can take a $3,000 Gibson Les Paul with traditional PAF pickups, swap them for a Gretsch Filtertron, and no matter how much mahogany from the forests of the Moon of Endor and how excellent its nitrocellulose super varnish is, the characteristic sound of these pickups will be maintained, thus radically and absolutely changing the sound of the instrument. This element can improve or modify the sound of an electric guitar, from a slight nuance to a totally drastic change. The strings can have a noticeable influence on the sound, depending on the manufacturer and its gauge or thickness. As we increase the gauge or section of our strings, it will provide a fuller and more forceful sound. The scale length of our guitar also has a direct influence on the tone. A long scale of 25.5 inches Fender style brings a brighter tone compared to the short scale of 24.75 inches Gibson style. Since the latter, having a shorter string length, will require a little less string tension to achieve a standard tuning. The bridge is another point of contact between the free vibration of the strings and the guitar. So a contact against a fixed bridge will not be the same as on a suspended bridge such as a Floyd Rose. Although this type of bridge is generally used in genres with strong distortions that will eliminate resonance problems anyway. The shape of the guitar within normal parameters should not influence the sound, but we can have the problem of choosing a guitar so ugly that it attracts more attention than our own music. As I mentioned before, the connection cable can also influence the tone, but the most versatile thing is for a guitar cable to have as crisp and clear a tone as possible. Low capacitance cables are the standard in a guitar cable, but if we want to darken our sound to the maximum, we can always opt for a high capacitance cable with the consequent loss of clarity. We arrive at the amplifier, another of the fundamental elements as far as the sound quality of the electric guitar is concerned. I assure you that if you plug a €2,500 Fender American into a bad amp and a €400 Squier into a good amp, the Squier will sound much better. So when thinking about a guitar, think also about the type of amp it will be plugged into, to compensate for the investment in both components. There are three general types of electric guitar amplifiers: transistor amplifiers, tube amplifiers, and hybrid amplifiers. As the name suggests, the latter is a mixture of the two previous types of amplifiers. Something that influences the sound quality and even the final tone of our guitar regardless of the type of amplifier is the speaker of our device. Since each speaker has its own characteristic tone and sensitivity, we can obtain a higher volume in the same device simply by mounting a high sensitivity speaker. This component must also compensate its quality with the quality of the amplifier. It will be useless to put a $150 loudspeaker in an amplifier that costs little more than the loudspeaker itself. Transistor amplifiers are less modifiable internally than tube amplifiers. In tube amplifiers, we can play with the brand and type of each valve without having knowledge of electronics. Since each tube manufacturer brings its own touch and qualities to its products, apart from being able to have different types of tubes with different gains, to orient the saturation of our amplifier to our personal taste. If you'd like to learn more about electric guitar string gauges and pickups, links to videos on the subject will now appear.